Hello, and welcome to Temple of the False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
Bruce, you brought us a topic today.
I did.
This is a Bruce original.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Voltron commanders.
Boo.
Yeah,
Just kidding.
That is the standard response. The belief that somehow Voltron commanders are no good. Mm-hmm. Voltron commanders are no fun. Voltron commanders are a waste of your time.
Well.
And I thought we would go through the pluses and minuses of running the Voltron commander. We go from deck building to deck play and on. Generally speaking, I think a Voltron commander gets a bad rap. I know that when I run the decks that I have that rely primarily on a Voltron commander, I've always had a good time. There are some issues, but we can talk about that as we go through the rest of the show.
Yeah, I mean, it is actually a coincidence that I brought this deck today to play, possibly. Nice. I'm holding my Sir Gwyn deck. If you haven't listened to it, we have a whole deck tale about it. Anyway, I don't know. I like Voltron commanders from like a fun aspect because they can do big things. But, you know, we can follow your lead.
Sure.
We'll go under the assumption that I'm wrong.
Should we talk about the pluses or the minuses first?
Let's talk about the minuses. These are the things that everybody knows. Right.
So the obvious first one, you have to do the 21 points of damage yourself. Mm-hmm. When you're looking at your opponents, the key thing to remember normally in a normal game of Commander is that you don't have 3 opponents. You have 3 other players. Mm-hmm. So if you are trying to get rid of one of those players, there are 3 of you doing it. So you can take that 40 life, divide it by 3, and realize that if all of you do 13 damage, you're still going to be 1 short, because that's just math. But the idea is that because all 3 of you are going after the same target, their life total, that you essentially have help. You don't have to do it all yourself. You don't need to be able to do a full 40 points of damage to one player. You just need to do your share. Mm. The problem with running a Voltron commander, if you're looking to eliminate them, and that's what you're trying to do if you're trying to win this game, you need to do 21 points of commander damage, and it's not 21 points of everybody's commander, it's just yours. So you have to do that all on your own. You can get a little bit of help in that, maybe somebody else can stop them from blocking, maybe somebody can pump your commander a little more, but practically speaking, you have to do the 21. Mm-hmm. That's just hard. It's hard to do, even with a dedicated Voltron commander. You're looking at least 2 swings.
Right.
And that's generally speaking once the game has progressed a little bit. If you're swinging in early, you're looking at 3, 4, 5 hits before you can actually get that 21 points of damage in. So
yeah. We've said it about 20 times so far, but Voltron, for those that don't know, Voltron, I guess a rough estimate would be a commander that likes to suit up, I guess. Yeah. Use artifacts and enchantments on a single creature, like the 80s cartoon. Yeah. Voltron. To go big with one and knock right in.
I mean, your legendary creatures, generally speaking, are not 21/21 creatures. So,
or even 11/11's double strike.
Right. You're going to need to do a little extra work, or you're going to need to swing more often. And most of the time, the better option is to make the commander a little bigger, mm-hmm. so you have to hit less often. So that's generally where the idea or where the term Voltron sort of comes from. And yeah, you're trying to do 21 points of commander damage with your commander. That's generally what a Voltron deck is looking at.
Something we will not probably be talking about too much that also would be under the definition of a Voltron commander would be pumping up something to 10 and getting in for infect. They all fall under the same kind of idea, but to not say that a 10 something with infect is not Voltron. It is. So
yeah, I mean, the idea is you're targeting with a single source and hammering in, and we're talking commander, so it's most of the time it's going to be your commander because we're looking at 21 points of damage as opposed to a general 40 and having to try and hit for that.
And that's without any life gain or whatever.
Right.
That's without any blockers.
Right. So, like I said, the 21 points of damage by itself, you're not getting help. So you really are reliant on your deck to shine. Your deck's got to come through for you every single time. And we all know that doesn't always happen. There are plenty of games where whether it's Mana Screw, Mana Flood, you're missing some key components to your deck during the course of the game. It just happens. But when you're in a group game, a lot of times you can fake it. You can, hide in the weeds for at least a little bit until things start to come around.
That's how I usually play my games.
Right. With a Voltron commander, hiding in the weeds means everybody else is just getting a little lower on life total, but you still need to do the 21. That total doesn't change. The only time that number changes is when their entire life total gets below 21.
Right.
In which case, you're just finishing them off with your commander.
Right.
So it's it's just something to sort of keep in mind.
Yeah. And kind of when the whole strategy of the deck ends up being like, okay, get my commander out, suit up my commander with all these either enchantments or artifacts. What's the word? Equipments. There we go. The idea is that, when so much of the deck relies on that workflow, that gameplay, it doesn't really open the deck up for more well-roundedness that you would kind of need for a deck to be.
You want the consistency.
Thank you.
Yeah, consistency with a Voltron deck. Yes, your commander is always there because you have ready access, but the consistency usually involves something else. Maybe you've got 3 or 4 cards that give your commander double strike. If you don't draw those cards, well, you're going to have to hit twice as often because the double strike just isn't there. And then it turns into how consistent is your deck? How consistently can you get to that 21 quickly without having to take so long that it becomes pointless?
Right.
You're aiming to do this.
And even beyond that, there's the whole thing with people see it coming, so they'll prepare. They'll kill your commander, so then you have to play it again and again and again. And each time, not only is the commander tax going up, you're probably paying to equip these things.
Right.
Which then just adds up, and you need a lot of mana.
Right.
And then you're like, I need to ramp more. And then it's,
right.
this
And if
weird
you're not paying to
act.
equip, well, then the aura that you had on the creature is now gone. You have to either get that from the graveyard or find something else that's going to do a similar act. All of this can get challenging. It sort of ties into the next point that I had. When putting the deck together, it's difficult to build the deck in a way that you're not simply winning the exact same way over and over and over again.
Right.
And as anybody who's had a commander deck for more than who's played it for more than a dozen times, that gets dull fast.
Yeah.
And do you really want to run the same kill condition over and over again? The whole point of Commander is 100 card singleton. It's supposed to be variety. It's supposed to be you want to mix it up. And so if you've built this Voltron deck that essentially wins using the same cards in the same way over and over again, and we're already moving down that path because you already know you're doing this with commander damage.
Right.
Then the deck itself just gets boring. And that becomes really tricky because then you're looking at alternate ways to buff your commander that make it feel different for you. Maybe you're looking to build up your commander as this indestructible force that just simply hammers through everything in its path. Or maybe you're looking to build it as a massive creature with shadows, so it simply slips through any defenses that they have and hits. You can, there are a variety of ways to do this, but generally, you have to be aware of all of this as you're doing your build.
Yeah.
Because you just, it's very easy to just put a half a dozen ways to give it double strike and a half a dozen ways to pump it up so it's huge, and just rely on those options over and over again. to get through.
I think, and I think what kind of also harps more on that boring aspect is that, when building the deck, you're going to still be wanting to put in ramp, you're still going to want to be putting in protection and removal and all these things. But because there are then going to be so many categories, because then you're going to want evasion, you're going to want ways to pump up your commander. So because you keep on adding these things, and to make it more consistent, you want to have especially the evasion and the pumps to be more consistent.
Right.
You're going to be looking at the rest of the slots and be like, oh, it's not very varietous. There are obviously ways around that we'll talk about a little later with pluses, but it does end up looking like, oh, I'm just going to pick the best artifacts or the best equipment, and I'm going to pick the best, I don't know, other things that do the things I was just saying.
Yeah, and to sort of tie it along that line, how it feels like you're playing the same way, it even goes beyond just the cards. I mean, if you're playing a Voltron commander and you're trying to do 21 points of commander damage, the best option is to choose one opponent and hit them repeatedly until they're dead, because if you're trying to do commander damage, you're not getting help from anyone else. So it's not as though, okay, I'll just throw in a few points here and a few points there and I'll mix it around so everybody's getting hurt, because then everybody's still there and they can all still swing back at you. You're not eliminating that opponent to get them out. And so it turns into a situation where your play style itself becomes very very uniform.
Stale.
It becomes stale. So you're not often getting an opportunity where it makes sense to hit one opponent, for 6 points of damage, and on the next turn to hit a different opponent.
Right.
Because you want to get these people, the whole point is to do the 21 to a player.
And I've definitely seen this in my Lelia deck, which I guess could then also be considered a Voltron commander. It does a lot of other things just because of the nature of the card draw and the things that the deck does. But overall, it's a Voltron commander, and it is much easier to go one by one. I've honed it in a bit to have a good amount of protection and self-protection, honestly, to be able to kind of get around these pitfalls that Voltron tends to wind up in. But, to lead us into our next
there's two more.
Our next point with that is okay, you're going after this one person again and again and again and again. First off, that's not going to do great for your political game in this game. It's going to peeve that person, for one. So the next game you play against this person, they're going to come right back at you. And second, you're going to put that person out of the game immediately.
Right.
And our next point is quite that. Yeah. That person is out of the game. Now what? Right. You have to follow that up with taking two other people out, unless they're already going at each other. But generally, you have to follow it up with finishing the game rather quickly.
Yeah.
Because otherwise that fourth person is just bored or sad or not playing, and you did that. You did that, Bruce.
Right. And that's part of the problem with, not only does it create a uniformity, a staleness in your gameplay going after the one person and eliminating them, you now also have a person who gets to sit there and stew about it. Who gets to watch the rest of the game knowing that, oh, Andy managed to take me out early with his Voltron commander, but now he's having a problem trying to do that to the next person, and now the game is dragging and going on and on. And I mean, we all want these commander games to be fun for everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's not really fun for everybody. So,
and honestly, even along the same lines, it does do the thing that all Commander games wind up doing, which is you kill one opponent, now you have two people looking directly at you rather than those two people looking things are slightly more focused towards you, especially now that they know that you can take somebody out.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of the tricky part, because with Voltron, there's no sneaking up.
Right.
It's not as though, oh, look, somebody's down to 8 life. I've managed to here. I'm going to swing and do that 8 points of damage. Oh, okay. So you finished them, but maybe you're not necessarily the threat. You just did. You just happened to be there at the right time to do those points of damage. With Voltron, you're doing 21. Now, maybe you are swinging in for the last 8 points of damage on that 21, but you've already done all the other. Everybody knows that you can do this, so there's nowhere to hide here.
Yeah, and especially where you're putting all your eggs in the basket of this one creature doing all of it, it leaves you kind of open. You kill one person, then 2 other players have a turn before it gets back to you. And, I mean, that's the nice thing with Sir Gwyn, at least, is that she's got Vigilance. She's got Menace. So, like, she already has the blocking, she's got the evasion already tacked onto her. But, I mean, you look at any of these other Voltron kind of commanders, I guess except for Yennet. Yennet also has Vigilance and Menace. But you look at a lot of these Voltron commanders, let's say Lelia. She's tapped until it comes back to me.
Right.
And if somebody has any sort of removal, it's going towards that, because it requires you to get those +1s on to actually do the thing. Otherwise, you're starting from 0 again.
Right.
So, I mean, it's you can have it be consistent. There are ways. It's not impossible. It's just...
Right, and that sort of hits into the last point I've got as far as the minuses of a Voltron. You really do need to build with an alternate plan in mind. And maybe this is less of a minus and more of an alternative solution. But your deck can't be completely Voltron. It just can't. Your opponents, it's too easy for your opponents to key in on your commander or whatever other key card you're running and simply take that out, which leaves you then completely high and dry and unable to do anything else. There has to be an alternate. There has to be, even if it's just, the rest of your deck with creatures trying to get in to do damage or to hang, or to protect or however. But there has to be an alternate. There has to be another solution. And honestly, that's a solution that you really want your opponents to know is there. You don't want them wiping out your Voltron because they think that that's your only solution. You don't want to have to rely on the alternate, but at the same time, you do have to have it there because there are,
Yeah.
I mean, my Yennet deck is an example. It is primarily Voltron, but it will run without. I mean, without Yennet on the board, it continues to do what it does. It
has a good curve.
It puts some creatures out. It has it has a lousy curve because it's only odd. But
it compensates by being fairly low. Like, you've got your big haymakers, but...
Right. So it allows me to okay, the Voltron plan is not working right now. Let's shift gears, and we're gonna focus on getting some card draw and being able to get out a number of creatures onto the battlefield and use that as an alternate plan.
Yeah,
it's the plan is not as good as Yennet swinging as a Voltron commander, but there's an alternate plan.
And I think generally what you're going to find that your alternate plan is playing the game. Not necessarily playing, your deck, but it's just like doing the magic thing of playing creatures and playing spells. And honestly, I've found that with my Lelia deck, the best alternate plan is playing the political game. Like,
Yeah.
You can very easily show that you don't really have much on the board. Try to not whine about it like I do sometimes, but I mean, like, like the with Commander, you can have people look other ways. You can be like, look, you know, I'll help out when I can get my commander back out or something. Like, there are these political maneuvers that you can work around to kind of slow your descent. Which, I mean, I find fairly helpful, especially with new decks.
Right. Well, and with any Voltron, that's an option. It's like, look, my commander is not on the battlefield. If it doesn't have haste, then you've even got that. You know, look, you know that even if I cast it, I'm still not going to be able to do anything. So I'm in a weakened position. So yes, you could attack. However, we're more concerned about this other player. And whether I've got my commander out really makes no difference. That player is still the primary threat. You should be focused on them. How well that works, I guess that depends on the threat assessment of the other players and how convincing you are and how nasty your commander has been in the past. So.
It's amazing because, I mean, you know, I keep bringing up Lelia, but like, it's a deck that I've played fairly often, fairly recently. And it's because it does do that one thing, which is just like these huge plays and takes a person out maybe quickly. But like, I've also heard from people in our playgroup that it just like is such a fascinating deck. And I think that, granted, it's doing the new red thing, which is lots of impulse draw, which is exciting.
Right. See, and with that, I think we're getting into some of the positives, or at least some of the ways to work around some of the minuses that we've talked about. And I think, like you've just described, how the deck plays out. If that's interesting enough to your opponents, a lot of times you'll get leeway. Or if you can make it so that what's happening with your deck is way more exciting, that's another way around the minuses.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do we want to head to a break
absolutely.
before we jump over and talk about the bonuses and the pluses?
Yeah. When we get back, we'll talk more about kind of ways to get around the negatives and kind of transition smoothly into the positives, the pluses, the pros. We'll wax poetic about pros. It's a dumb little pros joke. We'll be right back. This episode of Tumble Falls Pod is brought to you by Fire Shrieker. Fire!
Fire Shrieker. Nothing goes in a Voltron deck better than Fire Shrieker.
Fire! Now back to you. Welcome back, everyone. We're talking today about Voltron. We're talking about the pluses now. We've talked about why. We've talked about the thing that everybody knows about Voltron, which is that it's a big poo-poo stinker. Mm-hmm. But it's not.
No.
Not all the time. Sometimes it's a lot of fun. Sometimes it does the thing that we want exactly it to do.
Well, and that's literally the first pro of a Voltron deck is, for the most part, they work. When you're dedicating an entire deck to doing a specific thing with a card that you always have access to, I mean, it's the equivalent of a series of 2-card combos. And you already have one in your hand. I mean,
it does deck.
This should be not that difficult to be able to manage this. And it turns out that when you really do dedicate a lot of the cards in your deck to this, to the the Voltron idea, that they work. I've had plenty of games where Voltron decks that I was running have comfortably cruised in and done the 21 points of damage to one or two opponents, and then I can usually count on my opponents to finish somebody else off for me before I get there. So it's and it's a wonderful thing because because the dedication goes that way. So
yeah, I mean, honestly, like the only thing that's really holding you back is the consistency of your land drops, or if people are targeting you and targeting you and targeting you and targeting you, like you're just gonna have to. I mean, I don't know. I guess put in more protection.
Well, you redouble. A lot of the negatives that we talked about are products of the deck building itself.
Mm-hmm.
Voltron decks do have a tendency to draw attention to themselves, especially if you kill one person fairly early on, because then suddenly everyone's afraid that you're going to be able to do it to them out of nowhere.
Right.
Now, that's not generally the case. It's not as though you're going to suddenly swing in and be able to do 21 damage in one swing without them seeing it coming.
And if you do, you're going to be able to do it once.
Right, and oftentimes that's much, much later in the game. So it's, a Voltron kill should be quicker than your opponents think, but it's rarely ever going to be instantaneous.
Yeah.
So again, it's about building the deck properly. The other part is, we've already discussed that strategically the best way to do this is to swing at one opponent for the full 21 before moving on. Well, that makes sense in a logical sense, but it's not always the best strategy, because your opponents, if you spread the wealth, your opponents are much less likely to come after you because they suddenly have fear that you can wipe one person out that quickly.
Right.
It's like, oh, so so I'm not going to get hit with, 18 points of damage in one turn because you swung at me last time. You might be swinging at somebody else the next time.
Right.
So there's always that chance of maybe they're not gonna. And if you built that up so that their thought process in that is realistic, then you can get away with it. It just becomes part of playing the Voltron deck intelligently, as opposed to, I should do 21 to this person first. Well, wait a second.
If you put them at 16 commander damage and then go to the next person, the first person's less likely to just like go all out on you turn after turn after turn, because you can just hit once and put them out.
Right. If one person, if the person that you've attacked twice already,
right,
and the next time it looks like you're going to kill them, if they have a sorcery that can stop you, they're going to use it because they know you're coming at them next. By mixing it up, they're holding that sorcery and wondering, okay, do I play it this turn? Or are they going to, do 7 points of damage to somebody else? In which case, I don't want to stop them.
Mm.
So if you're mixing it up a little bit, you can likely get in more damage early and not have to face so much removal focused at you or you and your commander.
Yeah, definitely. So. And I think too, like kind of along the same lines, it is helpful to just talk about it. Like, I mean, obviously don't, be like, oh no, I'm not going to come at you. But like, if they ask like, hey, if I don't stop you, can you not come at me? Like,
right. When the
if you're on the other side, obviously.
Right. If the opponent, if it's somebody else's turn, you've already done some combat damage to them, and they look at their hand and they're looking at you, and they take that deep breath because they know they have to do what they're what's in their hand, but they don't really want to. They don't want to waste it.
Right.
It's okay to say it's not coming at you the next turn.
Mm.
I mean, that's all it takes. It won't come at you the next turn. Great. Moving on to the next. So then you go at somebody else the next turn.
Yeah. And, I mean, honestly, I think the thing with going after one person time and time again is that if another player catches on and, like, tries to stop you, then you can go after that person. You don't have to... Like, if you stick to your guns and you're like, I gotta get this person out, like... it may be more beneficial to look at who is targeting you.
Right. Now, when I say this, this is not to suggest that I think you should be swinging willy-nilly and at random with your commander at everybody or anybody and everybody, because then the entire table is wondering where it's coming. Oh, it might be coming at me. If that maybe is realistic enough, then anybody who's got removal is going to be using it at you, and that's the first thing you're trying to avoid when playing as a Voltron commander. You want to limit the number of people who are actually going to use their removal against you.
Yeah.
So, if all of your opponents think that there's a 33% chance you're going to hit them, well, then there's a real good chance that one of them is going to play removal if they have it. You want all three of your opponents to think that there's a pretty low chance you're going to swing their way. You want everybody thinking, oh, I don't know, I think it's less than 10% chance that he's going to swing my way.
Yeah.
Obviously somebody has to be wrong, but it's certainly it's just something to consider. I really think the idea with the Voltron is not only do they work, I think Voltron decks demand a certain level of political wherewithal when you're playing them. You really do have to work your opponents and make them understand that, or try and make each of them believe that they are not the target or the next target.
Right. Unless they've made it clear enough that they are, obviously.
Once an opponent has decided that you're the problem, well, yeah. I mean, you are the Voltron deck. If they've decided you're the problem and they're going to focus their full attention on you, well, then you need to focus your full attention on them. Yeah. And as someone if you've built your Voltron deck appropriately, you should be able to outrun whatever the hell they're trying to throw at you to stuff you. So there's that. So the other part I like about for Voltron commanders is I find the decks tend to be unique. Now, I don't mean that the cards in the deck, so that anybody who chooses Commander A, that their cards aren't all the same. What I'm saying is that almost nobody chooses Commander A in the first place. Andy's mentioned Lelia. There's just not that many Lelia decks out there, at least none that are going that Voltron mode. Yennet is not a particularly popular commander, and I would hazard a guess that most people don't run it as a Voltron commander. So there's a certain level of surprise there. There's novelty with this. I love the idea of being able to show up at a command fest with thinking that I will probably be the only Yennet deck that people face that weekend.
Yeah, and I would say even to the extent of something that's fairly straightforward, like Sir Gwyn, the amount of equipment and auras that are out there just proves to be a boon for trying to build a Voltron deck, because you have such a high variance in what you can play. If you just try to not do the best thing possible, then it's super easy to be fairly creative with it.
Right. I mean, we joked about our sponsor, and yeah, I mean, Fire Shrieker is one of those cards that's probably going to show up in most Voltron decks. Yeah. But there are so many other cards. There's so many other varieties and different things that you can do with each commander that really tailors into what that commander offers. It makes for a lot of fun. It makes for a lot of interesting gameplay, interesting deck selections. There are going to be some duplicates, but there's also going to be a lot of individual cards that most players won't have seen, or honestly won't be expecting, just because they're not used to seeing that many Voltron commanders. And
and I think kind of beyond that too, there is almost this I've found that with most of my Voltron commanders, there's been a card in each of the decks that kind of adds a bit of depth to the deck, where you kind of see this one card and you're like, oh, this is how the deck should be going. I mean, obviously with Sir Gwyn, you've got your knights and you've got your equipment. Trying to find this card, I don't remember what it is. But, like, even if you are fairly redundant in the abilities of your equipment, sometimes equipment do multiple things, or sometimes, like, having more equipment does a better thing. Mm-hmm. You've got your...
Well, I mean, like, with Yennet, one of the cards in the deck prevents creatures that have an even mana value mm-hmm. from attacking or from blocking. Maybe from attacking as well, I can't recall. But that's just not a card you're going to see anywhere else. And it's a huge boon to any huge boon to a Voltron deck, and it really fits the theme for Yennet. So it's in there, and it has worked wonders, especially when you've already got a commander that flies and has menace. It makes it really difficult to find ways to block it when you need two flyers who don't have an even, and neither one of them can have an even mana value. Suddenly your opponents are really scrambling to try and find any way to block.
Yeah.
But that's just, that's one example from one commander. And this is true of most commanders that would become Voltrons. So
I can't find the card that I was looking for that kind of shaped how my deck ended up coming together. But something that I try to put in the decks that I can, especially decks that want to attack, and especially Voltron decks, is a card called Bond of Discipline. It's from one of the Ravnica sets, I guess, mm-hmm. from War of the Spark, actually. It's 4 and a white sorcery. Tap all creatures your opponents control. Creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. So this it's twofold, obviously, where you kind of want effects that do both of these things in Voltron decks, where you want not only ways to get in, but ways to gain life. Because once you start hammering at people, they will learn and start to hammer back.
Right.
If you somehow get that one-hit kill in with your commander, and it has lifelink, then great, you're 20, 30 life up now, and you do have that exceptionally easier time trying to get the next person.
Right.
Love that card.
Yeah. I guess the last thing I really wanted to hit on,
mm-hmm.
And Andy, I think you've already touched on this just a little bit.
Oh, well, I'll just sit the rest of the episode out.
Good, we're done. Thanks so much, folks. The idea was how you're going to play the deck.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like you said with Lelia, people, your opponents want to see what is it going to do.
Right. They want to see you exile a very expensive card that you can't play.
Right. They want to see that interaction and see the weirdness.
Mm.
So, quite often, you'll get a little more play
Lenience.
On the line.
Yeah.
Exactly. They'll be a little more lenient, a little more willing to let you go a little longer than maybe they should. And it's just a lot of times it's not even a question of how you do your what is your strategy, but how you're playing the deck. And by that I mean are you excited? Are you grinning about it? Are you grumpy and ripping the top card and throwing and tossing it in your hand with disgust?
Yes, every time.
Right. Or when you're playing it, are you super excited to flip over that card that's going into exile?
Also, yes.
Right. Like when I play Yennet, you swing with you go to the attack, swing before the blocks are declared. Well, let's flip that top card. Let's see what we got. And you make it into a game show. You know, I'm grabbing that top card, I'm going to palm that sucker, and I'm going to slam that thing down on the table. And then we'll all get a good laugh because it's a land. Ha, ha, ha.
Ha, ha, ha.
Or it's, you know, or it's a 1-mana artifact that isn't going to do anything for combat.
Right.
Or it's in Garrick's Wake.
Ugh.
And it's just like, boom, whoa!
It's not only instant speed now, but it's at the exact moment you'd need it.
And
so nobody has to think about blockers because there are no blockers.
Right. So it's just... But you take that, and every single card that gets flipped over is a moment.
Yeah.
It's something that people think about, and they're like, wow, do you remember that time, you know, when you hit the Ingarrick's Wake? That was amazing. Remember that time when all you needed was to flip over a card that would give your creature +1, and you would have enough to do the commander damage to kill me, but you flipped it over, and it gave your creature +0/+1 instead. Can you believe it? That was so insane. And it's just, people are going to remember those moments, and they want to see them.
Yeah.
So it means that maybe Yennet gets to swing one more time. Maybe, you know, whatever the situation is. And, like, I mean, we've just described 2 cards where there's essentially it's a quasi-chaotic moment. But everybody can have this.
Yeah.
With virtually any deck. You just have to be super excited about this. You know, you're about to play the card, and it's like, man, I have been dying to play this game. Oh, this card all night. Wah! And just make people excited.
Yeah.
About your deck because you were so excited about this. And I have watched some players who can do this, and who you just feed off of it. It's like, I can't wait to play that person again. I don't care what deck they're playing. Maybe next time they'll play a deck that's just going to run me over, but they're so excited and super happy, and they can't wait to see this happen.
The best kind of players to play against are the ones that like you want to be run over by, like that they exude that energy that you're just like, oh yeah, kill me, like
right. And those, you know, a lot of these players, you know, you'll see players who get that kind of energy from the plays they're going to do. Well, when you're playing your Voltron deck, you have that kind of energy, but you maintain that energy on their turn. So when they put out, you know, when they get that second blocker so that they can stuff your command, you'd be like, no, in that over-exaggerated, ridiculous way.
Yeah.
You know, or you were as excited for their plays and the game interaction as you are for your plays. And I think that style of play just carries. It goes so far in you know, the kind of deck that you're playing and what people will tolerate and what they won't. And there are some players that may not care for Voltron, and there are times when you do take somebody out early, and it's like, I'm so sorry. It had to happen. You were so clearly gonna, you know, you were about to march over the entire table. It had to happen now.
Yeah.
And, you know, essentially you're explaining it as you were too awesome to be allowed to continue to play.
and I think, yeah.
And that goes a long way. It really does. So, you know, just something to keep in mind.
I think it really touches on a lot of good points of, like, you are the table that you make it.
Right.
And I think that, like, it can't be said enough in terms of, like, you need to be excited for other people's big plays. You need to be... I've seen plenty of people not even excited for their own big plays. And it just... it just drags down the whole game. It just turns this game into something way too serious. And people, like... I know personally I feed off of other people's energies. Like, the energy that they're putting out of, like, and if there's nothing coming back, it's just draining. And I'm just like...
Right.
Like, oh, great, this next card is just a land, okay. Like, it just... And then it's a feedback loop, which is terrible, but somebody's got to break it.
Right. I mean, we've all played against that person who plays the Cyclonic Rift to save themselves, but sets the game back forever, and then doesn't even give the feedback. It isn't that, oh, yeah, okay, I finally managed to hang in there. This is the, you know,
Yeah.
And thank God I managed to get this card into play, and I managed to get this done so that we can all survive for another turn, or look for we get a little more time to find answers or something. But too many times it's just I'm playing the Rift, everybody returns their cards to their hand, you play a few more rounds, but there's no feedback. It was just rote.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, you're
gonna
play.
No, that's a white card. Ha ha ha.
It just if you're going to run Voltron, and for that matter, virtually any deck.
Yeah. If you're gonna play Magic,
be upbeat
in a social capacity.
It will take questionable plays. It will take powerful decks and make players just excited to play with you. And that's really something to think about. And especially with Voltron, because like I said, there are times when you do become the target, or when you have to take somebody out early, or whatever the situation. You want to be upbeat. You want to be excited. You put that positive spin on it as best you can.
Yeah.
And just try and make it work.
I think beyond that too, like, it's not even necessarily be perfect. Like, you're gonna have bad days. Nobody's saying you're not. Sometimes you get home from a 10-hour day at work and you're playing Magic and you're just like, God, why is this happening? But like, if everybody at the table is at least trying to put in the effort to bring that energy up,
right,
it's going to be a lot easier for you, who at the end of a long day at work, it's going to be easier for you to also bring that,
right,
or at least like it's going to be at least a little infectious,
Yep, there's a chance.
Yeah. Anyway,
all right,
we're going to call it here. We're going to go play some Magic. People are starting to show up on our stoop, so we're going to play some Magic. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for hanging out. We'll be back next week with an episode about something, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stay cool. We're going to turn the AC back on now.
Thank God.
Thank you for listening. Have a great night, and may your fifth land be the temple. Bye! Wait. Before you go, I just wanted to say thank you for listening. You can reach out to us via email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com, or on Twitter @falsepodmtg. Bruce is @manaburned, and I'm @AndyWeekend, though you'll definitely notice I use the podcast Twitter far more often. Now that we've got you here, make sure you subscribe, like, rate us on whatever podcast platform you use. It helps us out. It gets us more reach. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Like a video there. Leave some comments for more casual enjoyment. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with some more timeless discussions about all things casual. So come hang out, and may your fifth land be the temple. Bye-bye. Should I do my best, Bruce? Bye!